It's been a long time since we got a World War II FPS comeback, and it might be even a bit longer. Here's what I have to say about Enemy Front, a World War II FPS based in Poland, developed and published by CI Games. The story is a generic tale of an uprising against the Nazis. The most generic plot and setting of them all, but the unique kicker here is that it takes place in Poland and is based on the Warsaw Uprising. But instead of a tale that brings inspiration, dread, terror, and hope, the game gives a story of how Hawkins, the main character, becomes an important figure in fighting back the Nazis and inspiring hope in people. And it's only because of his central presence and the fact that Hawkins gets shouted out throughout the story that I can slightly recall his name and character. Besides him, the supporting characters are easily forgettable because of being cliched. We have the witty side character that smokes, the German spy who fights against the Nazis, and an important female character that guilt trips the main character to do the right thing. The story is honestly so dull, so generic, and so forgettable that I'd recommend entirely skipping the story sections, which you can, because guessing what led to the next level would make much more interesting story presentations than what we actually got in the game.
Good. I'm glad the parts we need are surrounded by a bunch of Nazis.
Take cover there!
Did you ever want a game that had tried to be both a stealth and action shooter and make both elements generic and janky? Well, how about adding in inspired or ripped gameplay ideas from series like COD Slow-Mo Breaches or Far Cry's binoculars to tag enemies, or even Sniper Elite's slow-down bullet shots? Well, have I got the right game for you, as Enemy Front proudly wears all that janky generic glory on its sleeves. Even worse is that this game's gunplay, the main driving force for shooters, lacks any sort of oomph or quality feedback to its shooting. Now, to be fair, I applaud the game for letting me play how I want, be it actiony shooter or silent assassin, but if at least the actiony parts of the game is lacking, it's forgivable if the stealth aspect is good. This, however, isn't the case. Attempting to do stealth is rather difficult, as most stages either don't start you off with a silenced weapon, or the stages have no silenced weapons at all. To actually do so, you're gonna have to depend on being out of the enemy's cone of visions, which is either incredibly wide and far, or how janky you can make them blind to your actions. The only good times I actually had with the game is when I had the silenced weapons, but those moments are far and few, sandwiched between the more action-oriented COD-ish sections of the game. While its gameplay and story is severely, disappointingly, and memorably boring, dull, and generic, the game has one element that impresses me, and possibly one of the few things that shines radiantly from it. It's the fact that the game looks really, really nice. From the snowy mountain levels, to the seemingly peaceful countryside, to even its war-torn areas. The game's visuals never failed to leave an impression on me. There were even moments where I had to stop and look around at how pretty the game could get, possibly because of either great concept to actual in-game transition, or because Enemy Front uses the CryEngine, which usually ends up with very pretty looking games. This may be the other only element that will make this game memorable, is how pretty it looks, even on my sort of crappy laptop.
Gerüchte reichen mir. Sie sind das einzig Interessante hier.
Nur ein Wort. Spezialeinheiten.
Overall, no. There were parts of the game that had potential to be good, but most of that potential is squashed as you play through the game. It tries to be the COD of World War II games, but fails. It tries to be a mini Far Cry in open gameplay design, but fails there too. Hawken and his tale is forgettable and uninteresting, unlike the actual story it was based on. Maybe, if you're in need of a pretty looking but crappy action stealth shooter, maybe. Emphasis on maybe. But if you're not into that sort of game, skip it. It would be entirely worthless to you. Hell, it kinda did felt like it to me. If you ever looked for images that tie to the word generic, you'll see that Enemy Front would be the best game representing that. Enemy Front is impressively generic.